I think most country people, and certainly entertainers like myself, I think comedy is part of our being because it's kind of what helps you.
After 60 years together, the love story is over. Dolly Parton's husband, Carl Dean, died at 82, and now she's facing life alone for the first time. All my money, all my success doesn't mean anything without Carl, she confessed. The heartbroken star canceled all her plans and hasn't left her Tennessee home in weeks. Friends say she blames herself for his death. Now, at 79, Dolly is making the hardest decision of her life. Dolly Parton was born on January 19, 1946, in a tiny one-room cabin in the Smoky Mountains of Tennessee. Her family had almost nothing. Her father didn't even have money to pay the doctor who delivered her. So instead, he gave him a sack of oatmeal. That moment became part of Dolly's story forever. Later, when she became rich and famous, she even wrote a song about the doctor who accepted oatmeal as payment. It was a small beginning for someone who would one day be worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Her family was big. Dolly was the fourth of 12 children. They all lived in that one-room cabin together, packed in tight, without electricity or indoor plumbing. The cabin sat near the Little Pigeon River. Later, they moved to a small farm in a place called Locust Ridge. Dolly would joke in later years that she spent a fortune rebuilding her childhood home just to make it look as poor as it really was back then. The house had barely anything, but somehow the family made it work. Her dad did whatever jobs he could: farming, construction, anything that paid a little. Those hard times shaped Dolly deeply. They gave her the stories, the feelings, and the music that she would turn into songs like Coat of Many Colors. When Dolly was 9, something happened that stayed with her forever. Her mother gave birth to a baby boy named Larry. Dolly was thrilled. Her mom had told her Larry would be her baby to care for, but just 4 days after he was born, baby Larry died. Dolly was heartbroken. She felt like she had failed him somehow. That guilt stayed with her for years. Even decades later, she said that moment crushed her. Around that same age, Dolly also had a scary accident. She was playing outside and jumped over a fence. She landed on a broken mason jar, and it nearly sliced off 3 of her toes. Her family was too poor and too far from a hospital, so her mother had to fix the injury herself. Dolly's brothers held her down while her mother cleaned the wound with kerosene and stitched the toes back on using a sewing needle and thread. It was painful and messy, but it worked. The toes healed, and Dolly still walks on them to this day. Despite the hardships, Dolly's love for music was already growing. Her mother sang and played guitar, and even with all the kids to care for, she passed that love down to Dolly. By age 5, Dolly had written her first song about her cornhusk doll. Her mother helped write the lyrics down while Dolly sang into a tin can microphone. At 6, Dolly sang in church. At 7, she was playing a guitar made by her uncle. By 8, she had her first real guitar. By 10, she was performing on radio and TV in Knoxville. At 13, she stepped onto the stage of the Grand Ole Opry in Nashville for the first time. She was just a kid, but everyone could already tell she had something special. At age 10, Dolly got a regular spot on a local radio and TV show called The Cass Walker Farm and Home Hour. Her uncle had pushed to get her an audition, and Dolly walked right up to Cass Walker and asked for a job. The first time she performed, the crowd loved her so much they asked for an encore. She didn't even own a TV yet, but now she was on one every week, singing to thousands of homes across East Tennessee. Years later, when Dolly moved to Nashville at age 18, she didn't waste time. On her first day in the city, she went to a laundromat to wash her clothes. While waiting, she took a walk, and that's when she met Carl Dean. He was sitting in his pickup truck and called out to her. Dolly waved back. Carl later said that the moment he saw her, he thought, "I'm gonna marry that girl." He wasn't kidding. They started dating fast. Soon, he brought her home to meet his parents. 2 years later, despite her manager's warning that marriage might hurt her career, Dolly and Carl secretly got married in Georgia. Only her mother and a preacher were there. In those early years, Dolly worked hard as a songwriter. She wrote hit songs for other people while struggling to get anyone to take her seriously as a singer. With her uncle Bill Owens, she wrote "Put It Off Until Tomorrow," which became a big hit for another artist. That song, along with others she wrote for names like Kitty Wells and Hank Williams Jr., proved her talent. But it still took time for people to realize she could be the star, not just the writer behind one. Oddly enough, when she signed with Monument Records in 1965, the label didn't think she should sing country music. They said her voice was too high and sweet, so they tried to turn her into a pop singer. She released a few singles with a bubblegum pop sound, but they didn't go anywhere. It wasn't her. She kept writing country songs on the side, staying true to what she loved. After a year of flops, the label finally gave in and let her record country. Her first country hit came in 1967. It was called "Dumb Blonde," and even though Dolly didn't write it, the song fit her perfectly. The lyrics said, "Just because I'm blonde, don't think I'm dumb." It was the perfect answer to anyone who underestimated her because of how she looked. The song made it onto the charts and helped launch her debut album, "Hello, I'm Dolly." It also helped shape her image. Someone smart, talented, and always one step ahead, even if people didn't see it right away. Porter Wagoner was already a big name in country music when he decided to bring a young singer named Dolly Parton onto his show in 1967. He wore flashy rhinestone suits and had a loyal following. Dolly, with her baby face and high bouffant hair, was nervous and unsure of herself. Her first shows didn't go well. She talked too fast, and the audience didn't warm up to her right away. Porter remembered how rough it was in the beginning, but he believed in her. To help, he started singing duets with her, on stage, on his weekly TV show, and in the recording studio. Just 2 months after their first recording session, their version of "The Last Thing on My Mind" was climbing the charts. Even though RCA Records didn't want to sign her at first, Porter promised to cover any losses himself. That gamble paid off. Dolly would go on to become one of RCA's biggest stars ever. But behind the scenes, things weren't easy. Only 6 months in, Dolly and Porter were already clashing. She had strong opinions and didn't stay quiet. He didn't like that. Porter liked being in control. It was his show, and he expected things to go his way. Dolly didn't back down. Years later, she called him a male chauvinist and said they fought like crazy. Their relationship was full of tension, but they kept working together. Week after week, they performed as a duo, recording hit albums and appearing on TV. On the outside, they were one of country music's most famous pairs. But offstage, they argued constantly. They both cared deeply, but their partnership became known as one of the most dramatic feuds in country music. After 7 years of working together, Dolly knew it was time to move on. She had promised Porter 5 years, but it had stretched to 7. He didn't want her to leave. They were deeply connected, professionally and emotionally, but she was ready. When he wouldn't listen, she turned to songwriting, the one thing she could always count on. She wrote a song overnight and brought it to him the next day. She asked him to sit down and listen. As she sang, he started to cry. The song was "I Will Always Love You." It wasn't about romance. It was a goodbye, a thank you, a way to leave with love. reporter told her it was the best song she'd ever written. He said she could go, but only if he got to produce the record. She agreed. The song hit #1 and became one of the biggest country songs of the year. Later that same year, something unexpected happened. Elvis Presley wanted to record "I Will Always Love You." Dolly couldn't believe it. This was the king of rock and roll. She was thrilled. Everything was set. She was invited to the studio to watch him record it. But the night before, Elvis's manager, Colonel Tom Parker, called with a demand. He said they needed half the publishing rights to the song. Dolly was shocked. No one had warned her about this. She told him, "That's not my rule." The song meant everything to her. It was her future. She said no. The Colonel stood firm. No rights, no recording. Dolly stood her ground and walked away. Elvis never recorded the song. Turning him down broke her heart. She cried all night. Everyone told her she was crazy. It was Elvis, after all. But something in her gut told her not to do it. Years later, her decision paid off in a way she could never have imagined. In 1992, Whitney Houston recorded "I Will Always Love You" for the movie The Bodyguard. It became a global hit, selling over 20 million copies. Dolly made at least $10 million from that version alone in the 90s. Looking back, she joked, "I made enough money to buy Graceland." In 1973, Dolly Parton saw a beautiful red-headed bank teller flirting a little too much with her husband. Instead of getting angry, she turned that jealousy into something magical. She joked with her husband, saying he was spending too much time at the bank, more time than they had money. That real-life moment became the spark for Jolene, a song about a woman begging another not to take her man. The name Jolene came from an 8-year-old fan who asked Dolly for an autograph. Dolly loved how the name sounded and decided to use it in the song. What's even more incredible is that she wrote Jolene and "I Will Always Love You" on the same day. Two of her most iconic songs, born just hours apart. Years later, Dolly would thank that woman during a concert, saying if it weren't for her, the song, and all the money it made, would never have happened. Just a few years later, Dolly wanted more than country fame. She wanted the world. In 1977, she made a bold move. She released the album Here You Come Again, her 19th, but this time she aimed it straight at the pop charts. The title song wasn't even written by her, but she knew it had the right sound. It shot up to #3 on the pop charts and hit #1 in country. For Dolly, it wasn't just a lucky break. It was strategy. She hired a pop producer, picked songs that would appeal to everyone, and made sure every detail was right. Her gamble worked. The album went gold, then platinum, and opened a whole new audience to her music. When she reworked her song "Two Doors Down" into a pop version, it became another big hit. Dolly had done it. She'd crossed over, and the world was listening. Dolly Parton was already a star in music, but Hollywood was waiting. In 1980, she made her film debut in the comedy 9 to 5 with Jane Fonda and Lily Tomlin. The movie was a hit, and so was the title song Dolly wrote and sang. That song didn't just top the charts, it became an anthem. It spoke to the frustrations of working women using catchy music to deliver a serious message. The song earned her an Oscar nomination and 2 Grammy wins. People loved it, and critics did too. Years later, it was still being honored as one of the best songs in film history. Decades later, the trio reunited on stage at the 2017 Emmy Awards. It started as a fun throwback, but things quickly got heated when Fonda and Tomlin made strong political comments about then-President Donald Trump. Their words caused a stir, but Dolly didn't flinch. She stayed out of the drama, saying, "They're Lily and they're Jane, and I'm Dolly." That one line summed her up perfectly. Charming, independent, and focused on keeping the peace. She reminded everyone that her job was to entertain, not divide. And if all else failed, she said, she'd just crack a joke. While her fame grew, Dolly never forgot where she came from. In 1986, she bought into a small theme park near her hometown and renamed it Dollywood. She didn't just slap her name on it, she built it into something special. The park brought jobs and tourists to the area, growing into one of Tennessee's top attractions. Over the years, Dollywood added rides, shows, and even museums, all while honoring Dolly's music and Appalachian roots. It became a place where families could have fun and locals could find work. But Dolly wasn't done giving back. In 1996, she launched the Imagination Library to help children learn to love reading. Inspired by her father, who couldn't read or write, Dolly wanted to make sure kids had the chances he never did. The idea was simple: send one free book every month to kids from birth until they turned 5. What started in her home county spread across the U.S. and beyond. By 2022, the program was mailing nearly 2 million books a month to children all over the world. Dolly believed reading could change a life, and she proved it. Music was still at the heart of everything she did. In 1987, she teamed up with Linda Ronstadt and Emmylou Harris for an album called Trio. It had taken years to make happen, but it was worth the wait. The harmonies were magical, and the album was a smash hit. It stayed at the top of the country charts for weeks and sold millions of copies. The trio won major awards, including a Grammy. Years later, the album was placed in the Grammy Hall of Fame. Dolly said singing with them felt like a high you couldn't explain. It was pure joy, captured in sound. Outside a laundromat in Nashville on a warm September day in 1964, Carl Dean saw Dolly Parton for the first time. She was just 18. He was 21. And in that moment, everything changed for him. He later said, "I'm gonna marry that girl." And right after that, "Lord, she's good looking." Carl didn't waste time. He showed up at her aunt's house every day that week, just to sit with her on the porch. When he finally took her on their first real date, it wasn't to the movies or dinner. He brought her home to meet his parents. He already knew she was the one. Years later, Dolly remembered how strange it felt that he didn't say, "I love you," until after they were married. She said it left her as mixed up as a road lizard in a spin dryer. But that was Carl. Quiet, steady. Sure, their love lasted nearly 60 years. They didn't want a big wedding. On May 30th, 1966, they slipped away to Ringgold, Georgia, with only her mother and the preacher's wife to watch them say their vows. It wasn't supposed to happen yet. Dolly's manager had asked her to hold off on marriage so it wouldn't hurt her rising career. But they went ahead anyway. Dolly wore a simple dress her mother made by hand. She held a Bible and a small bouquet. Then, just a few hours later, they were back at work, like nothing had happened. Carl's mother had already sent out wedding invitations. They had to tell her to cancel them. It broke her heart. But Carl and Dolly weren't looking for attention. They just wanted to be together. Carl tried the spotlight once. That same year, he went with Dolly to a music industry dinner where she got her first songwriting award. After that, he said, "Dolly, I want you to have everything you want, and I'm happy for you. But don't you ever ask me to go to another one of them dang things again?" And she didn't. He never showed up at award shows, red carpets, or even her concerts. Some people started to say he wasn't real. In her book, Dolly wrote that fans sometimes told her, "We don't believe he's real." But Carl was real, just private. He stayed behind the scenes, cheering her on quietly, always there, always proud. Years later, Dolly told a secret. Carl used to visit Dollywood when she wasn't around. He'd buy his own ticket, and wait in line like everyone else. He didn't want special treatment. He just wanted to see it for himself. He'd wander the park, eat funnel cakes, and watch the shows. He didn't care for roller coasters, but he paid close attention to everything else. When he came home, he'd tell Dolly what needed fixing. "You need more bathrooms," he'd say. Or, "It's too crowded in that area." He kept doing that until the very end. Even in the shadows, Carl was always part of her world. And he always made it better. Dolly Parton has always known how to make people laugh, especially by making fun of herself. One of her most famous lines is, "It costs a lot of money to look this cheap." She said it in the late 1970s, and fans still repeat it today. Dolly never minded poking fun at her looks, her wigs, or even her rough childhood. She once joked that, as a kid, the only warmth in winter came from when her siblings peed on her in bed. That's how poor they were. But her humor made people love her even more. It also helped her deflect criticism without losing her charm. Behind the big hair and flashy outfits was a woman who knew exactly what she was doing. Dolly created her image on purpose. She wanted to stand out. She wanted people to remember her. After some early business deals went wrong, she decided to take control. She owned her own record label, her tour buses, everything. This kind of independence was rare at the time. When she had the idea for Dollywood in the 1980s, experts told her it wouldn't work. She fired them and followed her gut. It paid off. She once said, "I'm totally artificial, but I'm totally real." People laughed at her looks, but the joke was never really on her. She knew exactly who she was, and that was her greatest strength. That strength was on full display in a famous 1977 interview with Barbara Walters. Walters asked if Dolly felt like a joke. Dolly didn't flinch. She said she knew people laughed at her, but the truth was, she was the one in control. She was confident in her talent, her choices, and her life. Then Walters asked if people would have called her a hillbilly back where she came from. Dolly didn't get angry. Instead, she stood up for her roots. She said the people she grew up with had a kind of country class. She made it clear she was proud of where she came from. Dolly also has deep faith, but not in the usual way. She grew up in a strict church with her grandfather, a fiery preacher. As a child, she was even afraid of God. But over time, her beliefs changed. She now says she's spiritual, not religious. To her, God is a higher energy that lives in everyone. She doesn't go to church every Sunday. Instead, she prays and writes songs in a small chapel in her backyard. She believes she can hear God's voice in the wind. That quiet connection gives her peace. Her open heart also made her one of the earliest big-name stars to support the LGBTQ+ community. Back in 1991, she sang about family, including preachers and gay people, saying everyone belonged. In 2023, when Tennessee passed laws against transgender rights, Dolly spoke up. She said she had gay and trans friends, and she loved them all. She didn't judge. In fact, she joked that if straight people could get married and suffer, then gay people should be allowed to do the same. She stood up for people, again and again, even when it wasn't popular. And when some Christians criticized her for it, she pushed back. "That's God's job," she said, "not yours." While the world saw the public side of Dolly, there was always one person who knew the private side best: her husband, Carl Dean. They were married for nearly 60 years. They didn't call each other by name. Instead, they used nicknames like Mama, Daddy, Angel Cakes, and Dottie. It was their own secret language. In fact, if Dolly ever called him Carl, he'd get upset. That's how close they were. Even though they never had kids, their bond was as deep as any family could be. In 2016, on their 50th anniversary, they renewed their vows. Their first wedding had been quiet, with just a preacher and his wife. But this time, Dolly wore a fancy dress, and Carl agreed to be part of the celebration, even giving his first public interview. They sold the photos to raise money for Dolly's children's literacy charity. It was a beautiful way to mark a long and loving marriage. But in the years that followed, Carl's health began to fail. He had heart problems, and later, dementia. In 2019, he collapsed at home, and Dolly rushed him to the hospital. He recovered, but things were never the same. Dolly blamed herself. She stopped touring so she could stay by his side. She didn't want to leave him alone. No amount of fame or fortune mattered to her without Carl. She once said, all of her money, all of her success, doesn't mean anything without Carl. Then, on March 3, 2025, Carl Dean passed away at 82. The announcement was quiet and respectful, just like he had always been. He had stayed out of the spotlight for their entire marriage, even skipping Dolly's shows. He ran a paving business in Nashville and never sought fame. When he died, only close family attended the funeral. That was how he would have wanted it. Dolly shared a simple message after his passing. "Words can't do justice to the love we shared," she wrote. A few days later, she posted again, calling it a love note to fans and friends. She thanked everyone for their kindness and said she found peace, knowing Carl was in God's embrace. Then she ended with a quiet tribute, "I will always love you." On March 14th, just days after his death, Dolly made a surprise appearance at Dollywood. In an interview, she spoke honestly. "I'm doing better than I thought I would," she said. "I've been with him 60 years. I'm going to have to relearn some things." She admitted she missed him deeply, but said she was at peace because he was. There was a hole in her heart, but she planned to fill it with good things and carry Carl with her in spirit. Soon after, she released a new song called "If You Hadn't Been There," a tribute to the man who had always stood by her side.